When I was 12 years old, I started having symptoms where I would bleed rectally. And as a 12-year-old, that was it wasn't so much scary to me as it was embarrassing because, I started my period when I was 11, so it was kind of new and I wasn't sure what was going on, so I just kept it a secret. But the more and more I would pass blood, the more tired and weak I got. I would go to the bathroom, and I would remember coming out of the bathroom and just laying down, and I would be laying down for 20, 30 minutes before I could get back up because I was so weak and had no energy whatsoever. That was in May. In August, I started 8th grade, and I went to school, but I only went to school for about a week. And at that point, I was so weak and so tired that I couldn't really do much at all. I would sleep all the time. I would just lay on the couch. And I didn't watch TV. I didn't text. I didn't get on the computer. And pretty much that's what my mom figured out there was something wrong. So she took me to the doctor, and I was diagnosed with pneumonia. And my doctor said if it didn't get better in a couple days to go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital and they admitted me. And at that point I wasn't bleeding, but right before they were about to discharge me, I went to the bathroom and I was bleeding again. So Parrish contacted a pediatric GI at Florida Hospital in Orlando, and they had me transferred. And it was the first time I've ever rode an ambulance before. I was only 13, and it was scary. I didn't know what to do, and it was a hard time. And when I got to the hospital, they said that they were going to do a test on me, and I couldn't eat or drink anything. And I didn't understand, but one of the counselors there at the hospital pulled me aside and said I was going to have a colonoscopy and an endoscopy, and that means that they were going to take a camera and they were going to go down my throat and look at my upper GI and take a camera and go up my butt and look at the lower GI, and that hopefully would determine my diagnosis. For some reason, they did a blood test before that, and it came back that I had C. difficile, and that can cause rectal bleeding. But C. difficile is also caused by antibiotics that they give you, and they were giving me a ton of antibiotics. So they just discharged me and said, follow up with the GI doctor as soon as you can. So that was September. In November, I finally got an appointment with Nemours Children over in Orlando, and my doctor looked at me and looked at all my reports and was like, your daughter is sick, to my mom. And they said that they didn't understand why I hadn't been checked out or seen before that moment, because at that time my blood count was 7.4, and your blood count is supposed to be between, it's supposed to be like 15, 14, but 10 is where they really start getting like iffy about the entire thing. And he said, and at that point cheerleading to me was like my entire life. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't I had family problems. My parents had just gotten divorced when I was 10. My mom was working 2 jobs. I didn't have really someone there, but cheerleading to me was my escape. So my mom told the doctor that there was competition in about 2 weeks, and he looked at me and told me that I had to quit, because he told me if I were to walk out on that field, I would pass out right then and there. So he scheduled a colonoscopy and an endoscopy for that following week. And then at that point, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis. And pretty much that is where your body produces too many white blood cells, and so your body attacks itself thinking that there's bad cells when there's not. And so what happens is whatever disease you have is where it attacks. And mine was my entire large intestine. But at that point, it had only taken and attacked the lower 12 inches. Now, the large intestine is probably about 5 foot, and so mine was about a foot that it had been. So I started all different kinds of medications. That was in 2007. From 2007 till 2010, I was on pretty much any immune suppressant pill. Those weren't working. I was on steroids. I was on methotrexate, which is a type of chemotherapy. It's one of the lowest doses possible, but it is strong enough to be chemotherapy. I would take that every Friday, 3 pills every Friday. And usually I would just, throw up that day, that night. But then it got to the point where I was throwing up every day. My hair was falling out. I did not feel good at all. I felt like crap. So I finally decided I wasn't going to do it anymore. So I stopped taking my medicine, all of it. I was taking about 10 pills a day. I stopped taking all of them. And about 2 months later, my mom found out and asked me about it. And I told her I didn't want to take them. I was 14, 15 years old. I wasn't taking 10 pills a day. So she made an appointment with my doctor and told me that I was going to have to tell the doctor I wasn't taking my medication. So I went in there and I told the doctor, I refuse to take pills. I won't take pills. I don't want to. I don't want to be called a pillhead. I don't want people to say I'm popping pills, because that's what all the kids were saying. I couldn't go to school at that point. I was doing Florida virtual school. I did homeschool. I did telecalls. And when I told my doctor that, he said that he wanted to start me on Remicade, which is an IV infusion. And a Vinifer infusion, which is pretty much iron, but it's intravenously goes into you, so it's faster. So I would go there. He started it for every 4 weeks. I would go there and they would put an IV in my arm. They would give me my Remicade infusion. and that would take probably 2 hours, 3 hours, and then the Venofer infusion would take another hour and a half, 2 hours. So I would spend the day in the doctor's office watching TV with an IV in my arm. And the first probably 2 times it would work. And then they stretched it to 6 weeks. And after my third infusion, I would go home and I would bleed again, right after the infusion. It's only an hour, Orlando's only an hour away from where I live, and it was hard to hold in the blood to get to the house. That was in 2010. So the summer, I got my last infusion in May or June. And that summer I went to Texas with my sisters, like I do every year. And we were only there for a week or two. And the last day I was there, I knew I didn't feel good the entire time I was there. I just felt like crap. And the last day, the day I woke up and we were supposed to leave for Florida, I went to the bathroom and I just started throwing up. And I didn't know why. And so then we just, I didn't eat because I didn't want to throw over anywhere. So we got in the car, we drove off, and I just laid in the back of the car on my granny's lap and just tried to sleep because I couldn't do anything. As soon as we got to the hotel, we got in Florida, up in the peninsula, and as soon as we got to the hotel, my grandpa got a room. I went straight to the room and threw up everywhere. My mom got there and went upstairs. I was like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "I can't stop throwing up. I don't know what's wrong with me." So that was hard. I was up all night throwing up that night. And then that next day, we were supposed to go with my mom back to our house. So we got in the car, packed up, and left. I didn't eat because I knew I wouldn't be able to hold it down. It probably took about 8 to 6 hours to get back home. And those were the longest hours I think I've ever felt in my life. As soon as I got home, I went to the bathroom. I got sick. I went to my room and I laid down and I just passed out. My sisters went to their friend's house, my parents, my mom, my stepdad went out. And that, I remember having a dream that I was all alone by myself and thinking there was something really wrong, but I wasn't sure what was going on. That entire summer, we didn't have insurance, so I couldn't go to the doctor. So my mom took me to the doctor one day, and they tested me, and I had strep throat. So they were treating the strep, but I was still throwing up. I still couldn't hold anything down, and because of the antibiotics that they gave me for strep, I got thrush, which is a yeast infection in your throat. It basically coats your throat in yeast, and you can't taste anything. You can't. It's not a good thing at all. It's terrible. And so I was dealing with that, and then retested and had strep again. And then, but it was still constant. I couldn't stop throwing up. I couldn't hold anything down. So I stopped eating because I knew I couldn't. My body couldn't handle it. So in August, it was August 1st. I was at my grandma's house, and my dad came over to the house, and I was in tears. I was in the fetal position. I was grabbing my stomach, crying so hard it hurt so bad. And he asked me what was wrong, and I said, my stomach, I don't know. So he took me to the emergency room, and they told me that okay, yeah, okay. So they did a blood test, and everything was regular, and my potassium level came back very low. And because they can't inject potassium straight, like, you know, quickly, because if you do it quickly, that's pretty much how they kill the inmates in jail. But I had to stay overnight so that they could infuse the potassium at a level of where my body could handle it. So they did that, and then they did an x-ray and said I had toxic medical, which is pretty much where your colon is dead. The large intestine it does not function. There's no reviving it. It's dead. So they transferred me to Arnold Palmer, and which is where I always went. I was in and out of Arnold Palmer for probably 20 plus times since I've been 13 until 16. And they said that I pretty much, when I got there, the doctor came in and said, you have 2 weeks to live, and we have a surgical standby team on. And at that point, it didn't really affect me that much, just because I knew, I think I always knew that entire summer that I was dying, and there wasn't anything I could do about it. So they said that my dad was with me. It was an emotional night, and about, let's say, a couple, 3 or 4 days, they were giving me, I wasn't allowed to eat or drink, nothing, anything by mouth I was not allowed to have. They were giving me TPN, which is nutrients, through the IV. And they told me that they had a specialist who would take my case because I was 16, I was pretty much full grown, and he would take on my case. He was a colorectal surgeon, and if we agreed, he would come and talk to us. If not, their surgical team could do it. But they did not have a pediatric colorectal surgeon. So we had the colorectal surgeon come in, and he said, you know, you're getting blood transfusions every other day, and every time you have a blood transfusion, you're in the bathroom, and it's coming right out as fast as it goes in. You don't have much longer. They tried doing a bunch of treatments, like my Remicade. They would double dose it, didn't do anything. So he told me that that was a Wednesday, he came in. He told me he wanted to do the surgery Friday. And I knew that the surgery entitled, because it was brought up before by my mom, that about taking the bad part, the affected part of my intestine out, but I'd have to have a temporary colostomy, which is where they take your intestine and they pull it out onto your stomach. and you have to wear a bag on your side until they can go in and heal it. And regular scheduled surgeries like that, usually it's about 3 months for heal time, for recovery. So he came in and he said, this and that. And I was 16, I didn't want it, but I didn't have a choice. So he told me that he would do the surgery Friday. And I just kind of was like, this Friday? And he's like, if I don't do it, you're going to die. So I said, alright. My dad's in the corner, he's crying. My mom's on speakerphone, and she's like, okay. And so that night, they gave me another transfusion. And the night before, they prepped me. They marked my stomach for my ileostomy, yes, it was going to be an ileostomy. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, they came and transferred me from Arnold Palmer to Orlando Regional Medical Center. I was so scared because at that point they put a PICC line in. I hated needles. I couldn't stand needles from the beginning. And I asked my mom the night before surgery, are they going to do any more needles? I don't want any more needles. And she said, no. So as we're in pre-op, getting everything ready, the nurse puts another IV in my arm. And it wasn't that it necessarily hurt. It was just I'd been through so much the past weeks that I couldn't handle it. And then, I don't know if you guys know what arterial stick is, but it's the vein right here, the main vein in your wrist. And I overheard somebody say they needed to do an arterial on me because I was going to be under for so long. I didn't know what that meant until they came over, put a tourniquet on my arm. They'd given me some sedative to calm me down because I was freaking out. And then they started the IV, stuck me. They had to do a big needle. I don't know the gauge. I know it was big. It's probably an 18 gauge. But for those who don't know, a 16 gauge is where you get your belly button pierced, so an 18 is a little bit smaller than that. Just a little bit, not a lot. So they started that, and I couldn't control the emotion that was coming out of me. And because of everything that I was dealing with, I didn't even notice my parents around me, my grandparents. I guess my mom ran off and she went into the bathroom and she just couldn't control her emotions. And the nurses ran after her, and all I remember is them going through the operating room doors, me laying there, them telling me to move from one bed to another. And this operating table was just as big as I was. And the doctor said, are you ready? And I was like, I don't even think I said anything. I woke up. I was in recovery. And there was a lot of people around. But I really don't remember who was there. But I remember my mom telling me that my surgeon was upset. And he was very angry and he was very mad. I asked her why. And she said, your whole entire large intestine had died. Completely. There was no saving it. He said as soon as he picked it up, it fell apart in his hands. Your colon is supposed to look pink, pretty much like uncooked hamburger meat. And apparently mine looked like